Cops, what's the worst thing you've seen a dirty or unprofessional cop do? In 11 years of service in a variety of uniform and plainclothes details, I've given statements against 3 officers. First, friend showed up for work, still buzzed, didn't drive in, took the bus the morning after his transfer party. I would have covered for him, but he told the captain to go screw himself when confronted, and I was right there. Nothing came of it except that he was a persona non grata at our station. Second, new platoon sergeant made several inappropriate decisions over a period of a few months. Also found out that he was taking days off and fraudulently claiming he had court related to his old detail. We reported him and he was canned after an investigation. Third, while reviewing property crime reports, I noted a notoriously lazy officer from one of the uniform sections had thrown out an easily solvable file. I took the file and solved it with an arrest and then forwarded the details to the administration for actions. Now, things I've seen that I didn't report that technically I should have. First, friend, the buzz guy from above, once took off his badge and weapon belt in cells, opened the cell, and challenged a loudmouth threatening to come up at him. No fight occurred. Second, officers, including supervisors, routinely got free coffee at a local gas station. I personally didn't partake, but I didn't do anything about it. And third, I've seen a couple of officers collect air miles when filling up work cars. Unprofessionalism. First, I'm good at calming down hammered guys and other idiots, but I have a coworker who likes to intentionally rile my in-custody people back up for amusement. I've asked him not to do this, but I won't make a complaint about it. Second, I was doing a foot patrol with some rando from another station when he made a comment about, quote, 2 hot women coming our way. One overheard him and gave him a right reaming. I stood back and enjoyed the show. She seemed satisfied with herself and didn't go off on me, so I didn't pursue the matter. And third, I had one supervisor who was okay as a person, but painfully holier than thou with citizens. He loved to lecture people about really minor street disorder things like drinking in public. It was embarrassing, but there was nothing I could do about it other than try to avoid being on patrol with him. I never had a complaint regarding excessive force, nor did I witness anything that led to an excessive force complaint. We got in our fair share of scuffles, but nothing went overboard. One thing people miss when they say that all cops are dirty because even the quote-unquote good ones protect the dirty ones is that this is really an individual job. 80 to 90% of the incidents I deal with are by myself, and the rest are with usually only one person as backup. I have a small group of platoon mates that I see periodically over the shift, but in reality, I don't really work directly with them that much. And officers from other platoons and details I virtually never work with except for special events. Another platoon could be dirty as hell, and I wouldn't know. So, about the things he's seen but didn't report makes you wonder why a cop would do that? Is it like a bro code, cop code thing? Story 2. Witnessed another officer make comments to a bad guy that strongly suggested she was intimately involved with him. Asked a few other female officers what they thought, and the response was universally, write a report. Went to a trusted supervisor, told him what was up. I wrote a confidential report. He wrote a confidential report. We took them to command. She left the department voluntarily a few months later. I was a rookie at the time, but evidently there were suspicions about her for quite a while. There seems to be a widespread belief that officers cover for one another, and I think it is a misconception. Now, listen, I will help a good officer in a bad spot, absolutely. That help must be for an otherwise good officer, and it must meet 3 requirements. It cannot be 1, illegal, 2, immoral, or 3, unethical. Now, we're all human, we make mistakes. If it is an honest mistake or a stupid mistake, I will do what I can within the confines of the rules to soften the blow to a good cop's career. You said something stupid because you thought it was funny, real scenario? Okay, you need to go apologize right now. They're still upset, I will go talk to them and explain that you screwed up, but you're genuinely sorry. They're still upset? Listen, officer moron, you screwed up, dude. Report yourself. Reporting yourself is always the best course of action. Everyone knows mistakes happen, show that you recognize it, and take responsibility. Cover-ups, to the best of my knowledge, are not a thing where I work. If someone is dirty, they've betrayed their oath, they've betrayed me, and they've betrayed all my brothers and sisters in blue. They're worse than the bad guys, and they have nothing coming from me or anyone else I know. They do exist, and for the most part, they're pariahs. They can't even get a cup of coffee. Everyone sees the signs, knows the excuses, and won't touch them with a 10-foot pole. They're riding out their time until IU catches up with them, and IU will catch up with them. Story 3. This isn't the worst thing, but something I definitely won't tolerate. We have 4 small holding cells in our jail, but oftentimes we will fill the cells past capacity during spring break or other large events. To catch the overflow, there is a long bench along the hallway outside the cells with rings we can handcuff people to. We also use this bench when someone is acting up inside the jail cells. We will bring them out onto the bench and handcuff their arms to each side, but to reach to both rings, it makes it so they can't bring their arms to their sides. Not like stretching them apart, but they can bring their hands to their hips, if that makes sense. It doesn't hurt them, but it's not very comfortable either, so after about 10 minutes like that, they tend to go back in the cell and appreciate the bunk they have to lay on. Now, to my coworker, we had an inmate who was being a real pain, shaking the metal jail door, which was really loud and screaming. Also, our dispatch has to monitor the inmates, and the excess noise can disrupt our dispatch center. After warning him several times to knock it off, I decided to put him on the bench. My coworker came with me, and we each secured one of his wrists in handcuffs. The inmate was still angry and was thrashing around on the bench for a while before quieting down. I went to check on him, and he complained his wrist hurt on the side my coworker secured. I checked the cuffs and found my coworker had not double-locked the cuff, which is what keeps the handcuffs from getting tighter once they are secured. I pointed it out to my coworker, and his attitude was so flippant about it, I am convinced he did it on purpose, although I can never really know. His response was that maybe the guy shouldn't have been thrashing around and would learn a lesson. Not that I didn't think the guy was a pain, but our job as LE is to keep our cool when the hammered idiot we're dealing with doesn't, and the idea that an officer would hurt someone as a punishment is gross. I filed a complaint about the officer with my management, although I don't know what discipline came of it, if any. Now, when I have to work with that person, I make sure to double check these kinds of things. Oh, damn. Okay, so here we're on our way to cruel and unusual torture, aren't we? Good thing there are good cops. Story 4. Seen a lot. I work for a larger department that has had a very well publicized problem with corruption and bad behavior of officers. We have an awful reputation in the area as a result of stupid things officers have done, be it corruption, idiotic behavior, or whatever. A couple of examples. Had our ex-chief routinely have officers called to his residence for large parties he would throw. These would normally involve a fair amount of young people, booze, and a lot of pills. It was common for the officers that responded to the call to suddenly be promoted or end up on a specialty unit of their choosing shortly afterwards. Preferential treatment for certain officers or citizens due to their influence with command staff. At the same time, punishment of officers who spoke out against the chief or his lackeys. Specifically, a supervisor who had his schedule changed routinely so he was always working opposite his spouse in an effort to ruin their marriage. A personal example, a former chief who used his influence to trick me into dropping a felony case that involved charges in 2 jurisdictions, stemming from the same incident. Chief contacted me saying the prosecutor for the other jurisdiction has worked out a deal whereby we drop our charges, and he pleads to the more serious charge there. Later found out he sold that same line to the other jurisdiction, so the defendant got off scot-free. And one awful one, SRO, school resource officer, who was caught at a sleazy motel off-duty in his patrol car. When he was cornered, he fled the scene, so we had county deputies in pursuit of a city officer and a marked patrol vehicle. Stuff like this is why I'm trying to get out of this career field. Story 5. I quit 18 months ago for a job that pays real money. I worked in suburban America for a low-crime city. I backed another guy in a call. I don't remember what it was initially for. The guy we contacted at his apartment was Latino and I speak Spanish. I'm a whitey, so I translated for the other cop. He got the info he needed and then started telling me to ask him a bunch of legal status stuff. I went along with it for a minute or two until the cop started trying to get me to sling hate about illegals and crap like that. I changed from more or less verbatim translation to he says this and he says that, and I started to leave a bunch of his rhetoric out. When he, the cop, asked if I told him everything he said, I replied that what he was saying was BS and I wasn't going to sling hate. He started to rebuke and I said, "We're done here, right?" and walked off. The other cop was pissed at me and tried to talk to me about it later in the shift. I told him I didn't feel the same way about immigration and that I wasn't going to be his mouthpiece for that type of stuff and that if he wasn't happy about it, he should learn Spanish so he could tell them himself. He was pretty pissed at me. I later talked to my sergeant about it because I was still pretty new and the other cop got pulled into the office for a chat. Pretty tame, I know, but we were a pretty small city and department, didn't have a ton of crazy stuff going on. And I truly hope that's the worst he's ever had to deal with. And if you also think this guy rocks for not slinging hate in his small city, then please do hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. It really does help me keep me going. Story 6. I work in a city jail. A lot of people seem to love to misuse their power. The ones that get to me the most are people who mess with inmates with mental disabilities or disorders. It's one thing to play along with their delusions to keep them calm. It's another to lie to them and start stuff because you're bored and think it's funny. This is truly the most appalling thing I've seen. We all tell small white lies on occasion, especially to those who try to misuse the way certain processes work. The clinic, for example, they will attempt to go down around chow times in order to scam extra food. I will say, okay, let me call if it's not a serious issue. I make a fake phone call and then tell the inmate they have a medical emergency. They told me to call back in an hour if they have a serious medical issue like chest pains, and I will escort them. It's amazing how often they change their mind at that point. My inmates respect me because I give them respect to begin with. The amount changes depending on how much of a jerk they are, but it can't be gained back over time. They have seen me yell, they've seen me fight, and they've seen me save a life. I will always make time for someone who is depressed and just needs an ear to get stuff off of his chest. Basically, I treat people like they should be treated, as humans. Story 7. Former Fed agent here. I want to preface this with the cliche: the vast majority aren't corrupt and unprofessional. I never witnessed anything extreme, but that's because IMO, unless they are incredibly stupid, most dirtbags don't act like dirtbags around people that wouldn't put up with it. I'm sure this is probably the case for a lot of law enforcement. If you get a reputation for being a straight shooter, then the dirtbags shy away from you, or at the very least, shy away from doing anything shady in front of you. There were always the news stories from within the agency about people taking bribes, gambling with their government travel cards, getting DUIs, stealing subjects' property, etc. The biggest thing I personally witnessed would probably be what gets written in reports. It's not that most agents would outright lie, but there was this mentality that, quote, it's all in how you write it up. At first, I thought it was a training slogan, as in, make sure you write up everything that happened clearly and concisely, or the AUSA will never take the case. But I quickly realized it was more of a justification for falsifying reports for some people. Some guys would take that it's all in how you write it up to an extreme and completely omit things that might make them look bad, or even worse, add things to the report that never happened or change the sequence of events. Now that, BS. Someone asked me to help them edit a report they were doing. When I told them that they asked a lot of very important things prior to reading the subject his rights, he looked at me, then said, maybe I should put that part about reading his rights before this. I asked him if that's how it went down, to which he responded, no, but I don't want this to get tossed out. I told him I wouldn't help him edit his report and that he should think very carefully about changing the sequence of events. I honestly don't know what came of it, but I think he was worried that I would report him if I lied, so he probably let it in there correctly. The way I looked at it was, I'm going to tell the truth, even if it's painful. If I lose a case I'd been working on for a while because I was honest in a report, I'd be upset at losing the case, but at least I could live with myself. I can't imagine knowing you lied to put someone in prison for X years. Not worth it. Also, life pro tip, never ever speak to law enforcement, ever. It is the dumbest thing you can do, even if you don't think you are a suspect or have done anything wrong. Never give an interview without a lawyer, never ever. Alright, good advice, and I gotta keep reminding myself that there are good cops out there. It's just unfortunate that the bad ones give everyone else a bad name. Story 8. I have, fortunately, not seen any officers I work with do anything against the law or illegal. Not that it doesn't happen in our department, being one of the largest in the nation. I have, however, arrested a fellow officer for DV. It was not my most favorite moment, only because, as an officer, you expect fellow officers to be honorable men and women who use logic instead of anger. Although as a citizen, human being, and officer, I'm glad I arrested that guy. He is still in jail too. Off topic though, today's police force is nothing like the past. In the past, officers were expected by citizens to rough up anyone who talked back to them. I had an old retired officer from the 70s, 80s era tell me that citizens would walk up to him and ask why he didn't rough up the guys for talking back. Today, that would be unheard of. I don't know if it's the generation gap, but I feel like people back then were more hardcore. He would also say when they arrested young people, the parents would show up, ask what happened, and then start roughing up their kid, telling the officers that they would go downtown with them to testify that they kicked their child's bum, not the officer. Blew my mind because today, as an officer, you would have been fired so fast. Story 9. Federal correctional officer here. We had a female officer who was sleeping with 10 or more inmates in the prison. Had an officer get bribed into bringing cigarettes into the prison for about $300 a pack. Had a female CO get pregnant from an inmate. And the list goes on with stupid stuff that staff will end up doing for inmates for such little money. You have people throwing away their job that pays $50,000 plus a year for a few $100s. It just comes down to people being weak-minded and greedy. For some reason, we always have dirty staff around, and it is hard to pick out the idiots. Okay, hold on. You would think the idiots stand out like a sore thumb, but I guess they only really start to stand out when they get that baby bump going. Story 10. My father-in-law was retired from the FBI and took a job working as an IA for Shelby County Corrections in the 90s. He was hired by a new director who had been hired from out of state in an effort to clean up the lockup just northeast of Memphis. The new director figured an ex-Fibby was a good bet for a cleanup man. The place was a mess. The facility had gone smoke-free, and almost overnight, the prison guards went into business smuggling cigarettes into the prison. Cigarettes went for $1 each, and with one pack in each sock and another rolled up in each sleeve of their undershirt, they could clear over $80 a day. And one day, he set up surveillance and caught a group of guards lowering several cases of cigarettes down through a vent in the roof, and the flow of contraband into the prison was constant. In my father-in-law's opinion, most of the guards at the facility were just half a step away from being guests themselves. Sadly, the Memphis-Shelby County political machine didn't appreciate him investigating conspiring supervisors who happened to be appointed friends, relatives of the city mayor, and other public officials, so they conspired to terminate the director and afterward made it impossible for my wife's dad to do his job. One day, in the middle of all of this, while driving to work, he was rear-ended by a large truck with no plates in a hit-and-run while doing over 60 miles per hour on the 240 loop, and was pretty sure it wasn't an accident. The job hadn't been fun for a while, and he finally decided it wasn't worth it, quit, and took up retirement full-time. My family is now in another state, having left Memphis over 12 years ago. What a crap hole that place is. Story 11. Worst I ever saw was a guy driving a government vehicle off-duty and in plain clothes, slugging a beer and walking into a movie theater. Slugged another one when he came out, tossed the empty in the passenger seat and drove off. Blew him into internal affairs. I don't tolerate corruption or dirty cops. Not reporting it could lose me my job, and their actions not only make my agency look bad, but also taint public trust, which breeds animosity, which makes my job harder. Screw them. They're dirty. There are 100 guys waiting for their shot right behind them. No breaks for minor things either. Cops should be held to a higher standard, not a lower one. And to clear things up, operating a government vehicle in possession of alcohol is against policy, as is being intoxicated whatsoever while operating a gov, as is carrying a government-issued firearm while intoxicated. It's illegal to have an open container of alcohol in the vehicle and also to drive while intoxicated, regardless of who you are. If anything that I've learned throughout all these stories, there's still hope yet in all the good cops out there. So if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this one. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for watching this one.